Hi, people. Today I bring you something just a little bit different from the normal art content. We're going to talk about my recent road trip from New York to Mississippi to Georgia and back again. While we will be talking about the actual travel part, of course, I'm also interested in discussing what I feel I gained from the experience on a more personal level and how it may affect my artistic leanings going forward. And last but not least, if you're new here, hi, my name is Ree, and I'm an independent artist based out of New York. I currently own and operate my own small business, Owl Skulls, where I use my art to create accessories and general decor, like stickers, art prints, patches, and more. All links will be right there in the video description for you to peruse, and if you're into this type of content, please consider subscribing. I'm an old school YouTuber in the process of reteaching myself how to make and upload content, and I'd love to have you here with me on this journey. Now, first off, there's probably one big question you've all got. Why did I want to do this trip in the first place? And the answer is actually pretty simple. I have a friend living in Georgia that I haven't seen in years who was getting married, and I've got another friend down in Mississippi I've been wanting to visit for a long time too. The states are close-ish enough, and I've been really wanting to do some sort of road trip this past year just for the experience, so why not, right? I'm in a fortunate enough position right now that I have a car that runs well, that I have access to an Easy Pass, and that I had enough funds to pay for the absolute essential that is gas, among other things like food, where I slept, etc. I'm also very fortunate in that I have friends who want to take care of me while I'm with them, and so while I had to keep to a very tight and shoestring budget overall, I still got to eat very well at my two destinations, and I still got to do a couple fun things, like go to the Hunter Museum in Chattanooga, which we'll talk about a little bit later. My trip began on a Tuesday morning, where I drove from my starting point in New York and stopped for the night in Charlottesville, Virginia. Unfortunately, I had to start my trip 3 days later than I originally wanted, so most of my plans between home and my two destinations had to be cut, which unfortunately included exploring more of this area. I'm still pretty bummed out about it all because I also planned to visit the Great Smoky Mountains Heritage Center and spend a day out there, but had to skip that area entirely. Next time for sure, though. The next morning, I left super early so I could reach Asheville, North Carolina by noon and spend a little bit of time there. Absolutely beautiful area, and had some pretty banging coffee too. I only got to see a little bit and had to leave by late afternoon, but what I did see I enjoyed a lot. Another place that I would love to revisit another time and really get to know. After this, I got back in the car and headed down to Pelham, Alabama, where I stopped for night 2. This stop I was actually super excited for because of one thing, Oak Mountain State Park. If you know, you know, and that's all I'm going to say on that. But if you don't know, I'll say this. It's an absolutely gorgeous area with hiking trails, BMX tracks, golf if you're into that kind of thing, and it's also home to the Alabama Wildlife Center, which is the oldest and largest wildlife rehabilitation and education center in the state. Admission to the park was only $5 at the time I went, and definitely well worth it. I spent the bulk of my day out there wandering the different areas and nearly trapping myself down a really steep trail, but I survived and was able to grab a wonderful early dinner at Creekside Barbecue. I had a sandwich that had fried green tomatoes, goat cheese, pickled onions with some red tomato, and it was everything. That is all. Once I was done, it was back on the road so I could get down to Selma and put myself in a better position for the final stretch down to Mississippi. Had another early morning the next day, and finally made it to my friend on the Gulf Coast before noon that Friday. My filming of things started to slow down by this point, but that's only because I was focused on having a good time hanging out with my good buddy. 10 out of 10 experience, especially it being my very first time by the Gulf. And yes, the heat and humidity was absolutely oppressive, but I already can't wait to visit again. Immense thank you to Orion for taking such good care of me and for welcoming me so warmly into your home. I can't wait to see you again. The rest of Friday, all of Saturday, and Sunday morning, I stayed there, enjoying as much of the local area as I could. But by Sunday afternoon, it was time to hit the road yet again, this time for my final destination of northwestern Georgia. I left the coast somewhere around 3:30 in the afternoon Central Time and made it to my next friend's door by 11:30 at night Eastern Time, which is about a 6.5-hour drive altogether. Went to bed almost immediately, because obviously, and the next day started out with my first time, to my memory, at a Waffle House. Not bad at all, would definitely go again next time I see one. After joining him on a couple small errands, he took me over to treat me to the Hunter Museum, which ended up, unsurprisingly, being one of my favorite parts of the entire trip. Once we were done there, we stopped at a local bookshop, then took a break for a few hours before getting dinner. After dinner, though, was the real treat, a ghost tour of downtown Chattanooga. I'm not a passionate believer of the paranormal and consider myself a skeptic, but I really do find these types of things incredibly fun, mostly because it usually involves learning lesser-known historical facts about the locations. You could take the man out of Regent's history, but you can't take the Regent's history out of the man, you know? Anyway, I had fun on it, and that's all that matters. It was a long day, but a fun one. Thank you, Caleb and Anna, for having me, for keeping me fed, and for including me in your special list of special days. And the next day, the final day, was the wedding itself. I was busy helping to set up and then participating in the ceremony itself, so really only a clip or two from this day, but we finally got there. It was worth it to see my friend get married, even if by that point I was well and truly tired. After a couple hours at the reception, it was time for me to go. I could have probably stayed in town overnight again, but I was really anxious to get home. So, from Northwest Georgia, I made my way back up to Asheville for the night, and the next day, I made the long journey home, bringing me back to New York by about 9 o'clock Wednesday night. My primary goal in taking this trip, outside of seeing my two friends, of course, was mostly to try and gain some confidence and actually feel independent. I'm someone who struggles with being too emotionally dependent on my loved ones, because the honest truth is that I fear being alone. My life growing up could get very lonely, and after having to fend for myself for so long while not really knowing how to do it, it became easy to later fall into some really codependent adjacent relationships, just because I was so tired of taking care of myself. That's not healthy, clearly, nor is it going to be sustainable in the long term. So I thought maybe that doing something that's challenging yet reasonable for my present skill set might do the trick and get the ball rolling. On top of all of that, I've struggled a lot with generalized anxiety from the time I was a kid, and the really unfortunate thing about it is that it's completely paralyzed me at times. There are a few moments I could think of, just off the top of my head, where I was having to make some pretty important decisions that would affect my life in a big way, and just freezing up and refusing to even face it until my deadlines were up. I've missed out on a lot of things that I really do regret not getting to do, and the older I get, the more bad I feel about it. So I guess this was also a way of just finally pushing myself to do the biggest thing possible within my reach, regardless of how terrified it made me. Self-guided exposure therapy, so to speak. To be honest, it was both a win and a failure. It failed because in the end, I just wasn't used to being by myself so far away from home, and it really did start to get the better of me, no matter how much hyping up I was trying to give myself, or how much encouragement my partner gave me over the phone. This is gonna sound kind of ridiculous to some of you, I'm sure, but up until that point, I hadn't been separated from him for longer than, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days at a time in a few years. It's dumb, but I missed him so much. And whenever I saw an especially nice view, I would just immediately think of how nice it would be to share that moment with him, and it would bum me out so bad. And it's not even just that I missed him, it was the fact that I really was completely solo out there, with nobody to immediately depend on but me. And sure, I could always just call home if I got into any actual trouble, but remember, I was many hundreds of miles away from there. There's no way my partner or my dad could rush to my side. It would literally just be myself, my phone, and whatever wits I could summon up. By the end of the week, I was completely beat down. I had cried so many times just in those last 3 days, and I was so ready to be home already that I just decided to get up and drive the final 12 and a half hours in one go. And I did. It was the most exhausting drive of my entire life so far, for sure, but I can't even describe to you how good it felt to pull into my driveway at the very end. Even so, though, as hard and as taxing as it felt at points, I am still really glad that I did it, and I think that I mostly accomplished my goal of building confidence. It doesn't seem so at first, but this really was a staggering trip to make by car, and the fact that I got through it without any major incidents is absolutely something to be proud of. There's still so much more room to grow from here, but accomplishing this one goal, and such a demanding one at that, has given me tangible proof that I can actually get things done when I set my mind to it, no matter how difficult it may appear. And maybe it doesn't sound like a lot to some, maybe you think I should have learned this lesson much earlier in life, and that may be so. But I'm very proud of myself nonetheless, and I'm finally starting to feel more optimistic about achieving larger goals in the coming years. The fact that I've been driving for 11 years at this point definitely also worked in my favor and made things run more smoothly. I'm positive that if I had any less experience, it would have felt even scarier than it already did, which is hard to fathom. So at least I had that on my side. Still waiting to see if I get any tickets in the mail though, because as careful as I tried to be, I know I definitely still struggled on some of those roads I was unfamiliar with. Fingers crossed. Needless to say, my codependence was not cured by this trip, but it was still an important step in getting better and learning how to be okay with being by myself. Ideally, I would love to be able to do another road trip sometime soon, but change the destination and ideally shorten the distance by about half, just to allow me more time to relax and explore each stop I make. I really am so mad that I didn't get to see more of my on-the-way stops. I love just stopping in a town I've never been to and seeing how everyday life is. I love seeing what makes these locations special to the ones that call it home. On that thought, let's talk about the artistic inspiration I was getting along the way, because there was plenty to look at on this trip and plenty of time to think about it on the road. I already have a reputation for exploring subjects found in nature, but this trip really reminded me of just how beautiful it all is. I don't live in upstate New York, so I don't usually get to see mountains back home, but especially nothing like the Blue Ridge or Great Smokies. Not to be cheesy, but it honestly did take my breath away a little. I'm easily impressed by our planet, I do have to admit. Something I didn't quite expect to become entranced by was my early morning drives in the first week, when I was getting up and on the road by 6 a.m. latest. I've always loved driving as the sun rises, but getting to see the entire morning play out as I continued down and down the same interstate for hours was something else. I don't know. The morning twilight period, where everything is that particular shade of blue, is something that's always been a favorite of mine, and that affinity felt even more amplified here. But maybe it was just the novelty of being somewhere entirely new, who knows. Either way, it reminded me of how much I want to play with that theme in future works, and color palettes especially. Another thing I think I might start doing more of is environmental scenes overall. It's a little funny to me, because a common subject in my late grandpa's paintings were mountain and lake scenes, pretty much exactly like Bob Ross would do, but I normally find them so boring to do myself. Having now driven up and down those mountains throughout my week away and being so blown away though, I do have to admit, I'm itching a little to try my hand at it again and paint from some photos I took. I think it's a good thing in general to do things that you're not used to or don't normally choose to, but it could be worth it just to maybe feel a little bit closer to him and deal a bit more with that particular grief. Going back to the Hunter Museum, I of course have to mention their amazing collection of works, from Impressionist to Abstract Expressionist, Contemporary, and most things in between. Outside of the clips I showed here, I also took plenty of pictures of specific works that spoke to me, whether because of the colors, subject, textures, etc. I felt especially lucky to find the Janet Fish piece that they have. I went to a show of hers in Chelsea back when I was going to FIT, and I just love how bold the lines and colors are in her works. I don't normally like still lives all that much, but her works are so dynamic, even with how simple her subjects are, that I just have to love it. Absolutely legendary use of light and reflections. If you haven't been to a museum or a gallery in a while, I definitely recommend it if you're also feeling a little stuck and uninspired lately. Not everyone can though, and in that case, a lot of museums have published online catalogs of their current collections. It's not the same viewing experience, but it could certainly help if you don't have the option of an in-person visit. Look a little more into your immediate surrounding areas too, because you never know what you might find as far as smaller scale independent shows and galleries. If your local colleges have art programs, keep an eye out for the shows they put on throughout the year. It's not always the blue chip galleries that have the best work. Overall, if this trip did one thing for me, it 100% refreshed my appreciation of nature and just being alive in general. It's honestly amazing what simply being someplace else away from your house can do for your general zest for life. I'll be thinking about the views on some of those scenic routes for a long time. It really got me that good. If I had to do it over again, I definitely would have made some small changes, like allowing for more time in certain places, eating a lot more locally, and trying more things in general. I also would like to figure out some better strategies to cope with the loneliness before I attempt another solo trip. But at the same time, I do feel like I did about as well as I could have here, and it was still way more of a success than I think I could have accomplished had I tried this even just last year. The therapy's finally working, guys! And that'll about do it for now, I think. I hope you enjoyed this little experimental number, And if you did, please consider giving us a like and or sharing it with someone you think would also enjoy it. Or don't, totally up to you. Also, if you're watching this as someone who knows me and my family in real life, please don't show my grandma this. She gets so stressed out whenever I travel anywhere, and I always feel so bad. She's literally 93 and just doesn't need this. Okay? Thanks. As mentioned previously, all links to my shop and socials will be down in the description, along with the video's timestamps and anything else important that I might have forgotten to mention here. Until we meet again.